about the school, who you serve, and why mental health is such an important part of what you do.
Yeah, sure. So it's funny, your talk just set up everything for me perfectly.
And we've never met
before. And I'm sitting here like almost cheering. I'm like that, yes. So I'm MJ Korpela, and I'm the Family Services Director at Mainspring School, like you had mentioned. We're a private nonprofit preschool here in Austin. And we serve, the majority of our kids are coming from what we would call like an at-risk population. Most of that is based off of income, although a quarter of our families are in the foster care system. We make a priority for that demographic as well. And then we also have some families that would be considered refugee families who have English as a second language as well. So, and that is the mission, that's the choice. We're here to serve those kids specifically. So I love this idea of mental health as that first, versus us talking about it as like something that as a diagnosis that happens in high school, but recognizing that it's actually an ongoing process, just like regular health. And at Mainspring, we have the 3 big pillars we talk about that are specific to this exact conversation. The first for our kids is just really high quality early childhood education, which is really hard to come by for the demographic that we're talking about actually. And actually here in Austin specifically, and Kathy will say more about this, but about 60% of our kids in city that are 6 or under are actually in poverty, so it's pretty substantial here. So really high quality education, that means we're the highest accreditation you can get. That means we don't skip corners on any type of services for our kids, which again is kind of a challenge given the fact that we're serving this population. The second one is basic needs. We talked about nutrition. Our food is all farm to table. We're serving as many whole foods and fresh cooked meals as we can, because we know that artificial colors and artificial flavors and that type of stuff can really mess with children who are already having a ton of stress and maybe have some high cortisol levels. And the third one, which is where I come in, is a trauma-informed program focused specifically on attachment and coming alongside our families, because we recognize that our children are not alone on an island. They are part of a big system, both at school and at home. And so, whole picture, what does that look like for attachment?
Good. So let's dive into some of these different areas that you serve. So looking at your classrooms specifically, what are the teachers doing? What would we see in your classrooms that are kind of getting at this mental health component?
Yeah. So one thing we try to really really emphasize is that our teachers are the caregiver. So we are focused, we don't talk about mental health as much as we talk about attachment all day, every day. Our babies are with our teachers for 8 to 9 hours a day, every day. We, by design, we don't stop for the summer, we keep going. We have long days until about 5:30, every baby is there. So anything that a parent would do, like a healthy attachment would do for these babies, that's what we're looking to do. That means physical touch, that means holding, even up to 3 and 4. Children learn to soothe by being soothed. And each child has, what we're learning is, this is very rudimentary, but if you can imagine, each child has like a certain amount of times they need to be soothed by an adult, right? And that number is that child's like number. Regardless of how old the child is, they still need that number of times to be soothed. So if we have a 4-year-old in our program that is crying in a corner like an infant, we hold that 4-year-old like an infant, right? And we're meeting the needs that this child is presenting versus just more of like a cookie cutter model for each kid. And our teachers are doing that on top of course, all the academic stuff that we're expecting of them. But I will also mention that the focus at the end of the day, you had said it perfectly, they're never going to be able to function in a classroom. They're not going to learn how to count or do ABCs if we can't help them find secure attachments with adults and regulate emotion in the first 5 years.
And then addressing the basic needs of children, how are you doing that? Because as Anne mentioned, having food insecurity or poverty, that can all, lead to this stress in children.
Yeah, so basic needs, it's we have a pretty serious case management program for every family, and it's just need-based. As a community, we're coming alongside parents and recognizing like, oh, this child's showing some food insecurity pieces, or we're just publicly saying to parents like, if you need anything, please come to us and we will solve the problem. Food, clothes, a place to sleep, a bed. If you're living in your car, please tell me, and I will do whatever it takes to try to find you a safe place to be. And really the magic of that basic need piece is that if we can, we get them as young as possible. We get them at 6 weeks sometimes. And so it's a constant basic need being met for 5 years. So it's building upon all of these different, like, the needs that, like, all of us, for me, for example, I take for granted for my kids. We give them 5 years of that. That's really the goal.
And then, so you mentioned parents. You have a big program that's helping parents and addressing their mental health, which we know trickles down to children. Can you talk about what you're doing with parents?
For sure, yeah. So parent education, which is just as it sounds. We have a bunch of different education sessions and suppers and stuff, and we invite everybody to come in. We'll bring in speakers related to a number of different topics. We have a parent support group that is really parenting classes. We use a really specific attachment-centered framework. It's called Circle of Security International. I mean, it's 12 weeks of, thank you. It's very evidence-based. Everything we do is actually. And if anybody is interested in hearing more about like the actual programs that we're using, I can provide you with a resource list as well. But yes, we use Circle of Security International, and it is incredible. But it is literally just you and your child, and are you attuned? What is happening in the brains of each of you, and how can we make sure that you are able to meet needs? Because yours as an adult have been met. And it's ongoing. And my families often, within that 5 years, repeat this course 4 or 5 times. And then just in general, we're just focusing on relationships and attachment and building a support system. Another characteristic of poverty is that there's not always much social capital there. I know that if any tragedy ever happened, I have someone to call and say, I need food, I need a place to sleep. Do you got a couple $100 for me? Most of our families don't have that luxury. And so we're also in school building that system. So if we can't meet basic needs, there are people around that can.
What kind of success are you seeing, or what evidence is there in your school that tells you this approach is working and this is helping the needs of the children?
Very basically, unfortunately, I wish I had the exact statistic off my head, but it's like 90-something% of children in poverty hit that kindergarten stage and are not testing on like age level with their more affluent peers. And when I say testing, I mean, again, across this big, all different categories. So we're talking about academics, but we're talking about cognitive development, emotional regulation, all of this. And ours are actually 100%. If we have them for more than 2 years, they leave Mainspring testing ready. So that's just a basic, right? And that's not through like rigorous academic programming, it's through attachment. It's through basic attachment.
I'm sure if there are people here who work in preschools, you may be thinking, this all sounds great, but I'm sure there are a lot of challenges to offering all these services. Your role alone is pretty unique. Can you talk about some of these challenges, and how are you funding all this? How are you making it all happen?
Oh yeah, the challenges. Basic challenges funding. We're a private organization, and there really isn't universal funding for us currently. We use some childcare subsidies, which has some limitations. One being it just isn't covering the cost of care. We have some federal money coming in for Head Start. There's that. So it's funding just in general, because we're pretty admin heavy. You know, like you said, most preschools don't have a full-time clinician that's available for staff all the time. So yeah, it's that. We recognize that we're primary caregivers, so we're open all year round on 8 to 9 hour days. We don't take vacation at Christmas. We have a couple days, right? But we're not taking weeks. We don't have a summer vacation. So our teachers are tired. We ask a lot of them. We ask them to be emotionally present and physically available, and we're saying, meet these needs all day. So we ask a lot of them. So that's it, is staff that is exhausted and depleted. I think one thing to really keep in mind too is like we have 100 kids. And we have, I mean, just full disclosure, our yearly budget is $1.2 million. And a lot of times when we're talking about education, we're looking for like big numbers. Like what program has the smallest amount of effort but touches the biggest amount of people? And unfortunately, it's just not, it doesn't work that way. You need prolonged, long-term, first 5-year type of intervention. So we have 100 kids, but really any given year we're turning out 17, and we just put 1.2 million into that year, right? So convincing people that that's effective and worth it is a really big challenge too.
So for other schools or other teachers out here who are working in schools, if they do want to start implementing some of these programs, what would you recommend? Where should they start? What might be the most manageable?
Yeah, I would just, one, give yourself permission to focus on emotional needs. There's so much pressure. I think a lot of times, especially in big classes, we think of like, well, I can't stop and like solve this child over here like crumbling in the corner. I gotta keep going. I have 20 kids and I gotta teach them how to count. But I promise you, both for the child that is there crumbling and for the rest of the group to see you meeting those needs and to be a part of it and to have this mentality of like, we're in this together. Long-term outcomes will be better than I can't with you right now because I have to teach the rest of these kids to count. So to start, give yourself permission to focus on attachment and emotional needs.
Thank you. I know we have some questions for you, so we'll get to those at the end, and we'll turn to Kathy right now. Kathy,